welcome back. Thank you for joining us today. And I hope you enjoyed your meals, if everyone had it. I would like to just start off by saying thank you to everyone who cooperated into doing this conference, especially the Human Rights Platform. And I'm really happy to be included with all these incredible panelists together. My session that I'm moderating will be on racism, refugees, and discrimination. And I would like to say a few words about how challenging and tough times we've been going through these days. So it's really important to have such a conference and to see all of you joining us today. As you may know, it's all around the world, it's the same thing, but especially in Cyprus nowadays, we have seen in the field the increase in racism, xenophobia, discrimination, and as activists in the field, we're very concerned of how this is going. So it's really important for all of us to be together and work on these and how to tackle these issues. So I would like to start off by introducing our panelists. So I have Professor Dr. Chanel Hüsnü Rahman with me today. Her main area is the social psychology, and her main field is especially on discrimination, prejudice, multicultural works, and gender and LGBTI rights. And we have Ashraf Salim here, and who is an undergrad psychology graduate, also a master's student, and also a very honorable activist since 2015. He has done a lot of work on the areas of racism and discrimination in the North, and he has worked with several civil society organizations. And we have here Ayman Napani, who is a graduate of international humanitarian law and human rights law. And he is a peace activist, an environmental activist, and he has been working as a cultural mediator for refugees for more than a year now. And so, first of all, I would like to start off by Ms. Chanel with her presentation. I'll give the floor to you.
No? Yes? No?
No?
Do you need to switch yours off for mine to be heard? Hello? Can you hear me? No? Should we try this? Does this work? Ah, this works. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to the Human Rights Platform for organising this incredible day. And I'm just very lucky to be here with you all. So, as Dennis said, I'm a social psychologist. My area of expertise is prejudice. It's more so prejudice reduction. But today I'm going to be talking about racism. Thank you so much. I know I'm going to make really weird sounds with this, so I don't want to get too close, but okay. Apparently I have to stand here. So today, how do we do this, Dennis? Do I do that? Does it work?
You can press this one.
Okay, all right. So today I'm going to just briefly define racism and discrimination for you. Can I be really annoying and ask you to move this towards me? Thank you very much. No, just turning it would be fine. Thank you so much. Lovely. Okay, thank you. Oh, sugar.
Yeah, we're back on. Yeah.
The British accent, you're going to think I'm causing trouble, as the British do. I'm so sorry. Yes. Thank you. Okay. I promise not to touch anything. So I'm going to define racism and discrimination. I'm going to talk about the anti-refugee sentiments because that's what's most relevant for us today. Some causes of them. Obviously, it has to be brief because we only have 15 minutes. And then I'm going to talk about the situation in the north of Cyprus and with some research that I've done alongside the Refugee Rights Association with Deniz in terms of what we have found when we did some research on attitudes. And I'm briefly going to talk about how, as social psychologists, we can tackle discrimination. So I'm going to start with prejudice. And prejudice has I'm going to start with a more general definition of prejudice, which is defined by Brown as any attitude, emotion, or behavior towards members of a group which directly or indirectly imply some negativity or antipathy towards a group. Now, prejudice is a more umbrella term. It covers what we call the ABCs. A stands for affect or emotions. These are the kinds of, generally, it's negative emotions that you will feel towards other groups. So it might be disgust. It might be a sense of anxiety about being in contact with somebody from, say, a refugee group. Or it might be pity, and these negative emotions are part of prejudice. B is the behavioural component. B is generally what we call discrimination. So you choosing to employ somebody based on their ethnic background is a form of discrimination. Not wanting to have a neighbour from a different race is discrimination. So it's the behavioural component of prejudice. And C stands for cognition, and those are our stereotypes, those very rigid, inflexible ideas we have with regards to different groups, and they are what we call the ABCs of prejudice. So racism is a combination of these as well. It is generally a feeling of I promise I didn't do that, did I? No, I didn't, thank you. Racism, I can carry on, all right. Racism is a belief of superiority, that your group, your race is superior to others, and the other group is generally not as good as you, and they are inferior. And this will influence how you treat them, of course. I said discrimination is the behavioural manifestation. Now, today when we talk about racism, we differentiate in social psychology very old-fashioned forms of racism. Old-fashioned racism is those very openly negative and derogatory comments and feelings that we have towards our other groups. So openly saying that you don't want your neighbour to be someone from a different race, or hate crimes. Although we have hate crimes today, they are definitely much lower in number than before. So these are what we call old-fashioned racism, and we don't see as much old-fashioned racism today. What we see are more modern versions. It's what we call modern racism. It's a more darker version of racism, in that it's a little bit more subtle and it's more indirect. So the idea that thinking that, for example, refugees or immigrants or migrant people they get what they deserve. That's enough. They've got these rights. What more could they want? Or ideas that, they're receiving too many unfair opportunities that they don't really deserve. Those kinds of ideas are what we call more modern versions of racism. It's not very clear, it's almost subtle, but they are more likely to be prevalent today when we look at cultures today and societies today. So we see much more modern forms of racism today. But don't let it fool you, modern racism is also very much predictive of discrimination. People who are high in modern racism also show discrimination. They are more likely to hire somebody from their own racial group. They are more likely to want their child to go to a school with minimum minority group members. So modern racism is an issue, and this is how we conceptualize it today. So when we look at anti-refugee and anti-immigration sentiments, we can look at we look at literature around the world, and we know there are diverse ways in which people respond to immigration and refugees. And some of it can be very positive, and people can be very welcoming. Canada is a good example of welcoming attitudes. But also what we commonly find is that immigrants and migrants and refugees generally are confronted by a racist and often unapproachable host society. And when we look at the society's opinion polls and what society believes and thinks, generally they report wanting all the borders to be closed and for refugees not to be accepted. This is a general finding culturally, that attitudes towards immigration and to refugees is generally negative. And the majority of participants have a perception about immigration being a burden on the social welfare system. So this is quite commonly observed around the globe. Now, a number of factors can affect anti-refugee and anti-immigrant attitudes. One of them is this idea that they are a threat. They are a threat to, this is what we call symbolic threats in social psychology, the idea that these different groups are a threat to our values, to our norms, to our culture, to our worldview, and that's what might fuel anti-refugee and anti-immigrant attitudes. Alternatively, it could be realistic, what we call the realistic threats, which are a belief that they are a threat to our resources, like the healthcare or housing or employment. They're going to take our jobs, they're going to take our houses, that kind of ideology. Other factors that influence these prejudiced views are negative stereotypes about not having enough correct knowledge about these groups and having a dehumanized worldview of them. Of course, the pandemic increased feelings of a lack of control, and the more people feel a lack of control, the more anti-everything their attitudes became. Very xenophobic attitudes increased, as well as anti-LGBTI plus also increased after the pandemic. Of course, political rhetoric, politicians using immigration as a tactic. Brexit, anti-immigration was one of the main tactics used for politicians as a way of convincing people for Brexit. Trump's massive wall and how he painted refugees and migrants also influences people's attitudes as well. And of course, worldwide, there is this increased authoritarianism, which is also feeding prejudice as well. So what's the situation in the northern part of Cyprus? The Refugee Rights Association does some incredible work. They did some interviews with refugees. Faika is with us, and she wrote the report. And they have reported difficulties accessing healthcare services, education for their children was lacking. They reported discriminatory treatment and high rent for housing as well. Voice, and again, Ashraf will probably tell us much more detail about the results that they've found. They did a study where they looked at international students, and 88% of them reported experiencing racism. So, in line with the Refugee Rights Association, we wanted to check the attitudes of people residing in the north of Cyprus with regards to refugees, with regards to migrant workers, international students, and we wanted to look at trafficking in human beings. Obviously, this is I'm not going to be able to report everything here, so I've taken bits of the report to be able to give you an idea as to what the situation is in the north of Cyprus. So we collected data from a representative sample of nearly over 1,000 people, ranged between 18 and 76, from all areas of the north of Cyprus. So again, I've taken items here and there, so you can see. Dennis, if you Yeah, you can see, for example, here, these two items, these two questions are generally asked cross-culturally, globally, with regards to people's attitudes about immigration. So the government should guarantee political refugees freedom to travel, and the government should provide a decent standard of living for political refugees. These two questions are generally used, and as you can see, we tested it on a scale of 1 to 5, 3 being neutral. Generally, people are a little bit lower than neutral with regards to this, and it is an indication of their attitudes not being 100% positive, and this is a general theme that you will see repeated. So if we look at a couple more items, for example, refugees in the northern part of Cyprus should be given the right for citizenship. Only 20% of our sample agreed with this. 50% agreed with we should close all borders, we can't accept more. Only 50% of people agreed with this, and much fewer people disagreed. I think it was only about 30% of people. And 54% disagreed with the idea of refugees being welcomed, and that we had to do this, we should do this, and a majority of people disagreed with this. Moving on, when we look at attitudes towards carrying on, sorry, if you can just go back, thank you. So for instance, immigration is bad for the northern part of Cyprus, and it divides society. 42% agreed. 54% agreed with immigration making it difficult for citizens of the north of Cyprus to find employment. Again, those threats come to play. Okay, and 50% disagreed that it was useful, that it was important for diversity, and it made Cyprus more exciting. So this is a general, that's okay, we can move on. This is a general measure we use. It's a thermometer. It's a visual way of asking people's attitude. 0 is very cold, 100 is very hot, and you can see that people's general attitudes towards refugees is quite neutral in the middle. Attitudes towards international students and migrant workers, we assessed this as well very quickly because oh, is this 5 minutes? Yeah. Woohoo. I thought it was 1 minute. Okay. So classical prejudice. So this is the idea that, more very clear, open forms of prejudice. So foreign students and workers need to go back to where they come from. They are a waste of money and time and space. People were more likely to agree with this than disagree, unfortunately. Another form of prejudice here, we talked about modern racism, and this is a version of it, having more conditional expectations of them. They can come if, having a condition to people's presence here. For instance, here they said only if they don't have a criminal history, then we shouldn't take too many. And people, again, were in the neutral here. Attitudes towards international students and migrant workers carrying on. So when you look at the percentages of agreeing, they were more likely to agree than disagree to things like they're not welcome in our country, they bring drugs into the country. A huge amount of people agreed with this. They always cause trouble. People were more likely to agree with this, and they were less likely to agree with the idea that it's a source of richness. And unfortunately, these are all indications of prejudice and negative attitudes. And that you can see, Dennis, you can move on, thank you. And that you can see from the thermometer when we ask them, it's much more to the cold end than to the positive end. Lastly, when we look at demographics, we found, and these are general, what we call our usual suspects. Men are more likely to be prejudiced. People who are older are more likely to be prejudiced. Lower educational attainment is predictive of prejudice. We looked at ethnicity, so we looked to see if there was a difference between the ethnic groups. We looked at Turkish Cypriot, and dual nationality. There weren't enough from other nationalities to check as well, but we found no difference. People were generally prejudiced across ethnic lines. So how do we tackle it? Obviously, If it was in our hands, people would return to their own home country without, if that's what they want to do. And so preventing war and violence and persecution would be wonderful, but those aren't realistic things that we can do. Things we can do is tackle media representation. For example, in the north of Cyprus, we know that any event, any negative thing that occurs that includes an international student is put in the media with very negative explanations. Referring to them as threats within the media are all things that we can change. We don't have to represent them that way in the media. Challenging people's and targeting people's zero-sum beliefs. So people believe that if, for example, refugees make gains, then this has a negative implication for themselves, but it doesn't. So, tackling those kinds of attitudes, challenging people's zero-sum beliefs is a way that we can move forward. Emphasizing a common identity, we're all human. If you dig down deep, you will probably find that you have an immigrant in your family, or you have migration somewhere down your family tree. Some research has shown that emphasizing a common group, for example, common religious group, is a way of building bridges. Just being all humans is another way in which we can move forward. And lastly, enhancing contact. This is my main area of expertise. I do a lot of research with Turkish and Greek Cypriots, and we find that contact is a really powerful tool to reducing prejudice, bringing groups together. We looked at contact. We found that only 12% of people had just one, not two, one friend from the refugee who was a refugee or from a migrant background. Nobody had any contact. So this is also a way in which we can enhance better attitudes, and we can reduce prejudice. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Hocam, for that beautiful presentation. And we would like to go on with Ashraf. Ashraf's presentation will be on racism today and in the northern part of Cyprus. So let's see. There you go.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Denise, for moderating this discussion, and thank you to the Human Rights Platform for organizing this event, and thank you all for attending and for inviting me. I'm very glad for your presentation, Hojam, because you did a lot more of the theoretical aspect and the research part, because when I was told to come and present on racism, I looked and I was thinking, I can speak for like 3 days on racism. It's such a broad topic. What should I really focus on? I wanted something impactful. And I thought I'm not going to do as a usual presentation of just reiterate the same things that I think everyone in this room knows, which is what is racism and does racism exist? I'm not going to talk about all of that. I want to make it personal, and I want to, hopefully my aim is that at least one person or all of us will leave this room today with hopefully one thing in their mind that they're going to do to tackle racism. One action or one plan to do it. And if that doesn't work, I would consider my presentation to have failed. So hopefully I really hope to achieve that. First, because really time is very limited. Yes. I just want to give a quick introduction. Most of my research and experience with racism I'm going to speak about comes from my work in Voice Cyprus, which stands for Voices of International Students in Cyprus, which is a civil society organization that works in the northern part of Cyprus to represent international students and to better their quality of life and to advocate for them and give them a platform to speak out. So please feel free to check it out. Very quickly, just some background facts and figures before I move on. Chinel Hojam already spoke about this famous statistic. I think it's got quite a lot of attraction. This was a survey that was done in June 2020. And 88% of foreign students said that they had been a victim of some form of racism, whether it be verbal or physical or just a perception. 88%. of around 500 respondents. That's a very alarming statistics. That's a very, very alarming statistic. If we generalize it, and there's around the latest census is around 100,000 international students in the northern part of Cyprus. 88% of, if we generalize, feel racism. That is shocking. That is devastating, to be honest. That's a signal that something needs to be done regarding racism in this part. The comprehensive, this is the latest, or one of the latest large surveys. It had around 700 respondents in February 2022. You can see that a large number of people, maybe around 40%, disagree that they feel comfortable reporting racial discrimination to their institution or university, basically, or the police, which is again very, very alarming and very large. And if you include the people who feel neutral, that becomes an even bigger number. In 2019, another large survey, around 700 respondents that Voice conducted, 30% indicated that they felt that they received unfair treatment from their university staff due to race. 30%, a significant portion. 20% considered leaving their institution for another due to racial discrimination. So if we say an average large university in northern Cyprus have around 15,000, 10,000 international students, 20% of them wanted to leave due to racial discrimination is very huge, is very large. That's basically where my presentation stops with the definitions and backgrounds and figures, and I want to take it more personal. I want to tell you what is racism, right? What is it doing? On the ground, in reality, what is racism? Racism is a student called William Peter, right? It's a Liberian student, a black student called William Peter, who was beaten up by 4 people mercilessly on the streets of Nicosia last month because he was wrongly accused of not paying a taxi driver. That is what racism is. The student was legally registered, no criminal record, high GPA, completely fine student, walking just around his day before he got beaten up in a planned action that was planned by more than 4 people, actually, in Nicosia. That is what racism does. And on the right, the left picture is the news. The right picture actually is a picture of taxi drivers who were posting his picture as WhatsApp status and saying that whoever finds the student will have a cash prize. And until today, there was no action taken about these taxi drivers or whoever did these public postings on their reward. So that is what racism is, and he's completely innocent. Racism is, I will come back to the slide, but racism is xenophobia, which I'm going to speak about, that has been increasingly, alarmingly increasing since COVID started, basically. But the xenophobic attitudes that we have seen incredibly increase by, unfortunately, not only the public, but by local bodies and people in positions of power themselves, who are actually not only having xenophobic attitudes, but they are perpetuating these attitudes and encouraging people to do them. It's actually have become very hard nowadays, and go ask any international students. If you walk into a market nowadays and not hear something racist, or get into a taxi driver and not hear a racist conversation, it's actually become hard. I have to go out of my way to avoid such kind of things. I go into a market and I hear, oh, these black people are just so lazy, or they're just they're all scammers, or they're all criminals, and we need to give them out of the country. For me, that's a weekly occurrence in any kind of market I enter. These xenophobic attitudes, the problem is they are not simply words, or they're not simply said and forgotten. These xenophobic attitudes, long term, they corrupt society. They really corrupt society. And they will translate, as they translated in the previous example I mentioned, into physical action on the ground. And with the local bodies ignoring them and then sometimes perpetuating them, it can lead to a very dangerous society, unfortunately, but that's really the reality. And I don't have time, but I have a lot more examples I can speak about. And feel free, you can check Voice Cyprus Human Rights Violations Report on real specific examples of what's happening. I'm talking of people who were shot by hunting rifles. I'm talking about people who were denied work because they were black. I'm talking about, that is extreme, a lot of examples of people who were denied accommodation because they are black, and much more than that. And no one is taking action, and everyone is staying silent. These are some, this is just 4 pictures, I believe, but we have maybe 30 or 40 of them documented. Xenophobic attitudes that are happening in social media circles, i.e. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, of what people are saying on a usual international student matters in the news. So I hope you can read them from there, but comments such as, for example, I remember one comment saying that these people came from the mountains and you should send them back to the mountains, and or jungles, and what are they doing in our civilized country, and they're all criminals, and deport them. These are very common occurrences. In fact, I'm not going to show you. Actually, I have like a game, if you're willing to participate. I have a game for everyone right now. Open your Facebook right now. Go ahead, open Facebook. Go to any newspaper, Yeni Düzen, Haber Kibris, Havadis, just any newspaper, just go to it. Find the most recent or any international student story you will find on there, whatever it is, right? And open the comments. I challenge everyone in this room if you don't see a single racist comment on it. In fact, perhaps 50% of the comments will at least be racist. Things just like the things I have mentioned. These are the examples we're talking about of the xenophobic attitudes that are happening in society. So you can do as I said. And another example is the Africa Gazetesi, which Voice had a bit of a war with, I think like around a year or 2 ago in 2020. Basically, it's a newspaper called Africa with a monkey as a logo. And monkeys have been used as a derogatory symbol for black people for a very long time, and there is like research and articles on it. I don't have time to mention, but even though after a lot of back and forth and a lot of discussions, they agreed to change the logo, if you go to their headquarters right now in Nicosia, actually the logo still stands. It was only a symbolic change in social media and it did not translate into the ground. And then I want to share a story that a friend just posted a couple days ago. I want to speak a bit about children. And again, these rising xenophobic attitudes, they're not just simply things being said and forgotten in society, but they are affecting people and they are affecting children and generations in a very real way. A friend of mine posted that a friend of his, they are black and their kid is in school, and the child was bullied and spat on by a couple of other kids, 10 to 15 other kids. They spat on him and they were bullying him, and no one was interfering until some parent came and had to take him away. And there were a lot of comments. I posted the picture on the right were people who messaged my friend either privately or in public and said that, yeah, this happened to us also. It's not like a unique case. Can you imagine how dehumanizing and how insulting and disgusting this is to a child? How traumatizing it must be. Do you think the child is going to forget about that, about such an experience? How are they going to grow up? What kind of feelings are they going to harbor inside of them? And do you think the children who bullied got it out of nowhere? Do you think a child is born racist? Or is it a reflection of their parents, families, and society around them? These are all questions we have to ask ourselves. And these are things that are reflecting on our children today. So what to do? As I said, I really would like all of us to leave this room with at least something to do and some sort of plan of action. And as Professor Hobart said, I also want to reiterate the same thing. Unfortunately, we have a disorder as activists and civil society organizations that we have a lot of echo chambers and bubbles that we just sit in and simply reiterate the same thing. Because as I said, to be honest, all the people in this room are not the ones who need to hear what I'm talking about. It's the people in other places. We really should do our best, and I'm going to come to that, on how to start avoiding this disorder and treating it. First, my message is to academics and researchers, definitely. We need more research that is more focused, because I think it's pretty much established there is racism. It's very clear. So we don't need more research saying does racism exist. We need more research that is more focused on maybe what is the types of racism, where is the racism coming from, or some sort of research on how to tackle racism into more of these narrow areas, or what kind of types of racism are being faced. from everyone, and this is perhaps my most important message if you're going to take it, what can you do? Well, first, don't stay silent. I'm sure all of us, including me, did this at least once. You faced, not you necessarily, but you came across a racist person or a racist incident, and you moved on with your day. Well, let's not do this. Let's not move on with our day. You come into a market, you come into a bank, you come into a taxi driver, and you hear him, he says, these Nigerians are scammers and criminals and whatever. Educate, share, talk, don't stay silent. Be like, well, no, it's not like that. Make sure you are educated, make sure you know what you're talking about, and make sure to always tackle and never leave these things just silent like that. Mention that you are wrong and because of this, and try to learn negotiation and all these things because they matter. The second thing, I don't know if this will be taken harshly, but it's really very important. In fact, I would say this is not harsh. We need to take action against such places, and that can be in forms of boycott and such forms of protest or actions. For example, and I do this, and I know friends who do this, and it's really one of the only ways that we can enact our power, and we are very powerful if we really know our power. If you know a business or you know of a person or something, or a landlord, for example, and they don't rent to black people or they are racist or whatever, if you talk to them and they are not changing their mind, don't go to them. And tell your friends don't go to them. Honestly, shame them. Tell people that this person is stuck 500 years in the past or more, actually more than that. And simply we should stop dealing with them. And if this actually happens on a society-wide basis, it will have an effect. From activists, as I said, enough meetings to discuss does racism exist? Really, enough of those meetings. First of all, something very important, racism is not criminalized in the northern part of Cyprus. It's not a criminal action. This is something that we as Voice, and I really call on everyone here that we should start working on. Racist behaviors, racist actions need to be criminalized in the law here. So this is an advocacy that we can work towards. Try to do workshops and educations and seminars with the people who are actually having these kind of views and behaviors. And in the places that not necessarily not your friends or people you hang out with. Let's have these kind of workshops and educational seminars or whatever. Let's try to do perhaps more creative outside of the box actions that can really impact and erase, even if just a tiny bit, because it's a slow, long-term action. It's not going to happen in one day, but slowly, we can reach there. Finally, I can speak about this for a whole day or a whole seminar from the press. Simply put, stop adding oil into the fire. Please, really, if there's anyone of the press here, I don't know because maybe it's because for clicks and views that they do it, but you see anytime that there is a black or international student on the news, their nationality is posted, their race is black student did this and that, and this isn't happening. It doesn't happen when it's a white person or it's a local person. This is very wrong. This is unethical journalism, and really we should learn what ethical journalism is, and we should make sure we abide by ethics of journalism and not just add oil to the flames, basically, and just increase these attitudes, because the actions of the press, as I showed before, have a very, very real reflection on the ground. They are affecting people's physical health, mental health. And I only spoke maybe about the physical, but there are a lot of students who are approaching Voice with really severe trauma. Like, I'm talking severe trauma, asking for therapists and for help, and people considering to leave the country because of these abuses. And the press is adding into that. So please, I really implore you to stop such kind of behaviors. Yes, my last slide. Racism is very personal. It's really a very, very personal act. It's very traumatic. It can damage people for decades. And it's a fact of the lives of many. Maybe a lot of us never faced racism, but know there are a lot, apparently 88% of people on this island of international students have faced racism. They are perhaps a large part of them traumatized by it, and they are really affected by it. So remember this, keep it in your head, and let's act in a meaningful way about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashraf, for your presentation. The numbers you have shown are really heartbreaking, and then I agree with you that we should all be able to step up, because I think we're all to blame when it comes to racism in the North. So now we're moving on with Ayman Nabani. He'll be talking about the right to seek asylum and refugees. And then here is your presentation.
Thank you, Denise. And thank you for the Human Rights Platform for this opportunity. Indeed, the numbers that Ashraf shared are shocking, and just while we are celebrating 60 days of activism against violence against to women and girls, and also while we are celebrating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I wanted my presentation to be focused on refugees and protection. Okay. So just if I can go with you with a short glossary related to the definitions. Refugee, who is a refugee? If we can say that the universal definition of this term came from the 1951 Convention, and it is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin, owing to fear of persecution. And there are many reasons that could push someone to flee their country, and we can talk in details about race, religion, nationality, membership to a particular group, either social or political. And then we can move on and define asylum seekers. And asylum seekers are those who have applied but yet have not been legally recognized as refugees. Persons of concern, in addition to the definition of the term refugee and asylum seekers, the UNHCR extended its protection to POCs, persons of concern, for the protection also and for assistance. Internally displaced people are forced to move within their geography in their country of origin, and that's mostly because they are unable to move to another country. Sometimes it's related to the geography where the country is. For example, in Yemen, we have the sea in the south and another sea in the east, so we only have Saudi Arabia to go to. And people in Yemen don't prefer to do that, so they internally displace themselves. I want to share with you a statistics that I came to know recently, and it was shared by the UNDP. 78 of the total IDPs in Yemen are women and girls who are in need of immediate protection from different forms of violence. And it's only because of the conflict. Their rights are being there's nobody to provide them with their rights, and when they internally displace themselves, they go through a lot. Now if we talk about the right to seek asylum, Article 14 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everyone has the right to seek and enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. And so, as I said in the beginning, refugees are people who are forced to flee their countries because of persecution or conflicts. Refugees are not able or willing to return to their country of origin due to their race, religion, nationality, conflict, violence, or circumstances that have seriously disturbed the public order. If we also try to think about what are the instruments that are available for the protection of refugees and asylum seekers, we can find protocols and conventions relating to the state of refugees. The 1951 Convention was announced at the time of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But if we actually try to see that the main principle or the core principle of the protection of refugees is the non-refoulement. It's Article 33 of the 1951 Convention, and it prohibits the forcible return of refugees in any manner whatsoever to countries or territories where their lives or liberty would be threatened. Non-penalization. Refugees shouldn't be prosecuted for their illegal entries. So non-penalization is mentioned in Article 31 in the 1951 Convention. But both of the non-refoulement and the non-penalization is carried by the local authorities here. Refugees are facing risk of non-refoulement, and also they are being penalized for the legal entry. Now, how can a human right law protect refugees? And I think this is no longer the question, because the law says that human rights law can protect the refugees, but rather how it can help refugees. And I think we're talking about the instruments that we can use while maybe we can interpret human rights law and international humanitarian law to the national laws. And we can find a harmonious interpretation within these three layers. So human rights law is the basis for refugee law, and also international humanitarian law protects persons who are not or no longer participating in hostilities. But we can see that international refugee law does not address all the problems relating to the protection of refugees. But when we apply them, they are applicable together. So if we apply international humanitarian law and human rights law, we can provide the international legal framework for the protection of refugees. Refugees are at risk, as we speak now, of facing serious human rights violation in the northern part of Cyprus. The principle of non-refoulement and the non-penalization is or are not being implemented by the local authorities, and thus refugees may be penalized for their irregular entry or residency, and they may be at risk to be back to the country or to the territories where they fled conflict or persecution. The Refugee Rights Association was established in 2009 to work against these shortcomings and violations, and to also provide legal and social assistance for refugees. We try to raise awareness on this matter. We try to advocate for legal change, and to also provide legal and social assistance for refugees. The association also expanded its activities to include human trafficking. This is it for me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ayman, for your presentation, and especially...
Hello, I'm Deng. First of all, thank you so much for all of the information that you have provided, which I think are very beneficial, especially the data that was provided by the research conducted by Voice, an initiative called Voice of International Students, that Professor Dr. Shanel Husnu and Ashraf Salim has presented to us. What I have been very curious since the beginning of your presentation is, Voice has gathered all these data, which can be said are pretty detailed and very well presented data. Have they had the chance where they had a platform there where they can present their ideas to the government officials or decision makers, where they will be talking about all of their concerns and get, I don't know, like guaranteed that their rights will be protected or the discrimination will be targeted by the government officials. I mean, please, I'm a queer person. I know how our government sucks at targeting discrimination, but there is a solid evidence, some data obtained by a research that was carried out where lots of participants have been included. So, briefly, have they had the platform to present their ideas to the government officials where they talked about ensuring safety and that they will tackle discrimination? Thank you so much.
Does it work? I guess it works. Thank you. Briefly, we had the platform. No, it didn't work. That's very briefly. Always in our meetings with responsible bodies, whoever they may be, we had, I mean, since the first survey Voice did that included racism, we've had at least 10 to 15 meetings. And with the relevant people, we always bring up the statistics and surveys. They're not just for display. They are being done, actually, the number one purpose of them is so that they can serve as evidence to be shown to responsible bodies that, look, it exists, do something about it. Either it's vague and empty promises that never go nowhere, or outright denial. One of these two options, usually it was what happens. One time we, actually they reached out to us, it was YODAC, the higher educational body, regarding the survey. They reached out and said that we should do something about it, and we formed a committee, etc., and then it never went anywhere because there was no follow-up and empty promises again. And we, this is not governmental side, as civil society organizations, we formed the Network Against Racism, which is comprised of several civil society organizations. And I mean, hopefully in this agenda that eventually to have some sort of sustainable and long-term advocacy plan or plan of action, hopefully that will go somewhere. It remains to be seen. But really, the road of activism and advocacy is always a very tough and slow one. Unfortunately, that's the reality. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for your answers, Ashraf. Just one or maybe two questions left, then we can. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Nigel, and my question is for the whole panel. So we have heard that racism exists, and we have been given the statistics. What is civil society doing to engage non-governmental actors, your universities, your hospitals, whatever? What engagement is going on that level? Because as we have seen, there's no incentive for government to change, as you have said, but business has to some degree a reputation to protect. So if you're saying that your university is racist, they would want to protect their reputation. If they don't do that, it might affect their profit. So what engagement is civil society doing? That's one. Number two, I'm from Zimbabwe, and we have what is called Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights. Similar platform to Human Rights Platform. It takes, issues to court. Do we have a similar mechanism in Cyprus where civil society acknowledges, yes, rights are being violated, we have documented it, what then is the steps that civil society is taking? Are they taking state actors and non-state actors to court to say, okay, these are rights that are in the terms of the Constitution, they have been violated, we want the court to enforce them? So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. I don't know if anyone wants to add something after I'm done, but regarding your first question, now obviously there is always room for improvement. Obviously, definitely we're not doing everything that can be done. And that is, I'm speaking on behalf of Voice here. And that is due to a lot of reasons that obviously affect every single civil society organization, and particularly Voice because lack of capacity, lack of funding, lack of members, and the fact that the demographic we deal with students, that itself brings a lot of problems with it. I mean, capacity-related problems. So there's definitely a lot more that can be done. But what is being done, or what's been done, aside from the meetings I've talked about, we've engaged before, it's been a while, but we've engaged in several events that promote contact, as Chanel Hoja said, whether it be social events or more serious events that usually bring all kinds of students together from all different ethnicities and diversities. And usually there's always games and icebreakers and events that hopefully, as much as we can, do kind of at least combat this racism a bit. We've met a lot of universities and discussed with them these statistics, especially the first survey when it was out. I mean, some say they have improved. I don't know, we haven't done a survey on racism specifically, not a large one, since June 2020, so we don't have the numbers to say if they have improved. I really don't know, but so we've done advocacy meetings, we've done events, and definitely there's room for improvement. Your second question, if I understand it correctly, is basically, can we take them to court, or why we're not taking them to court? I don't know, that's an option to explore. Sometimes, someday, hopefully, but there is always, again, limitations with it. The fact remains that it's a civil society organization, there's a lack of funding. Such a process is extremely lengthy. It can take years, and it can take a lot of money. Both things are very hard to find in civil society. So that's a hard limitation, but maybe it's an option to explore one day. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last 2 questions, then we're gonna have a 10 minutes coffee break, then we'll have some room for the 4th session. Ashraf will add something, that we'll have Aslı, and then we have 1 question there. Sorry.
Yeah, very quickly, on your second question. Also, a big reason that often a lot of the cases end up going nowhere, whether it's court or non-court, the people affected, they come complain to us, but then they end up going nowhere, because a lot of the time, it's young people. They are scared, or they end up like leaving the country or whatever. So a large number of time they complain. We tell them, okay, we have these options. Do you want to explore them? Sometimes they are scared. They don't want. They say, okay, just you know what, just forget about it. Sometimes maybe it's the last semester. They say, I'm leaving anyways. It's okay. So that's a large roadblock that we also face.
Hi, my name is Sam Abdulazim, and my question is for Ashraf Salim. Ashraf, you mentioned something about landlords and housing and racism in that sector. Can you please elaborate further on that? And if you can explain how the locals and the international students alike can mitigate this issue?
Very briefly, actually in regards to housing, one of my first week on the island, my first week in the northern part of Cyprus, this is like 5 years ago, I was looking with my roommate, he was from Sudan, and I was looking with him for a house. And I remember this very clearly because it was a sign of things to come, let's say. We were going with an agent to find the house, and I remember we parked the car and the agent was saying, okay, you can come to meet the landlord, but not your friend. And I was like, why? He said he's black. If the landlord sees him, she will not rent the house. That was like, wow, okay, so this is what's happening. And this is 5 years ago. Things have become worse now. So it's very bad with housing. It's very bad. I know a lot of people. I think every international student, if not them, knows someone who has been rejected a house. Like there are, I don't have the numbers. We haven't measured this specifically, but there are a very large number of houses and landowners who simply either don't give houses to black people generally, or to Nigerians, or a certain nationality. How to combat it? Laws, basically, as I said, we need to criminalize this. And some will say, well, it's like basically the landlord's right not to rent to whoever they want. Personally speaking, I don't think that's right. I think certain actions are extremely just stupid, to be honest. How can you not rent to someone from just based on their ethnicity? I think such a thing should be really criminalized, because, as I said, it is affecting people, and it's really creating a very bad reputation and a very bad image in the housing sector. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Isaac, and I'm a teacher, and I'm also a parent. I would like to say well done for this wonderful time. I don't know, I'm going to enjoy this sincerely. I want to thank Dr. Ashibe. She invited me from GAU. Okay, my son sometimes call me to tell me, Dad, we have class photograph. Quickly check your phone if it's been posted. And I will see it's been posted, but the one that shows him or any black will not be posted. I will just tell him, don't worry. Sincerely, there's something working in this country that is not working in my country. For now, education is working here. We know where we start and we know when we will end it. It might not be like that because of instability and strike actions. So parents are actually looking forward to keep their children. Parents want their children to learn, to educate. Even with the level of news all around don't come here, people still come here. And they will still come here. But we need to understand that people coming here are children. 17 years, 18 years, they are still in their formation stage. They have not developed the right attitude. They left their parents, they left instructions, they left coordination. Now they are here, they think they have freedom. Most of them misbehave, sometimes, just like children misbehave. And we can't throw them away because they are our children. But because we don't have any mother here, we don't have any father figure here, we can ignore them and say, whose child is it? So I want us to work more as a platform to support education in the world. Because God has actually endowed this environment with education. And we can build it and make it better by making it comfortable and convenient for people. Platforms where we have only white shown or people of color that are acceptable shown doesn't tell others that they are welcome. And whether we like it or not, they will be here. They will be here. They will study. Let's make it better so the world can be a better place to live. Thank you. That's my contribution.
Thank you so much for your contribution.
Eminim herkes şu anda kahve içmek ister, o yüzden çok kısa keseceğim. Ben biraz daha farklı böyle belki şeytanın avukatlığı ama suç işlemeye yönelik bir tespit, yabancıların çok fazla suç işlediğine ilişkin bir algı var toplumda. Ki bunu besleyen maalesef somut örnekler de var. İşte gerek cezaevinde, gerek işte haberlere baktığımızda. Tabii bunun belli sebepleri var. Biz Kıbrıslı Türkler olarak da buna çanak tutuyoruz çoğu zaman. Peki ve bu çoğu zaman bazen belli örgütler, işte yasa dışı örgütler aracılığıyla uyuşturucu ticareti olsun ve insan ticareti olsun, bu meselelerde yaşanıyor. Özellikle yabancıların işlediği veya maruz kaldığı. Bu noktada acaba Voice veya yabancıların örgütlü olduğu yapılar en azından bu suç örgütleriyle bir çözüm önerisi geliştirilebilir mi? Veya işte mesela siyahların çalıştırıldığı ve çoğu zaman çalışma izni olmadan kayıt dışı çalıştırıldığı ve emeğinin sömürüldüğü alanlar da var. Bu da ırkçılığın bir parçası. Yani bunun için bir çözüm önerisi nasıl geliştirilebilir? Yani burada Kıbrıs Türklere de şu öğretilir çünkü. Yani daha doğrusu gösterilebilir. Evet, bu insanlar belki siz suç işliyor gibi görüyorsunuz ama bunu siz de aslında buna imkan tanıyorsunuz. Belki Kıbrıslı Türk iş insanları da buna imkan tanıyor. Kayıt dışı çalıştırarak, emek sömürüsü yaparak veya farklı tür dediğim gibi uyuşturucu ticareti veya insan ticareti noktasında. Mesela insan ticareti noktasında sadece gece kulüpleri değil, dışarıda çalıştırılan kadınlar, siyah kadınlar var çok fazla. Yani bunlar üzerinden ne geliştirilebilir, bir öneri olabilir mi? Yani hepiniz cevaplayabilirsiniz bunu.
Am I right in interpreting the question that can Voice come up with ways to employ international students and make sure their rights are guaranteed? Is that the question?
The question is, can you create a dialogue with certain organisations that perhaps reinforce, because there is a reality, according to us, that a foreign student or migrant workers might actually be coming from immigrant populations, and they might be worked illegally by Turkish Cypriot worker employees as employers. So perhaps if you
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to understand that first and foremost, Voice's area of operation is international students. Before anything, and as we are already not being able to deal with the international students issues, so to expand to workers or migrant workers who are not students at the same time, because that is in our area of operation, but who are not students, that is beyond our area of operation, and will always support hopefully other organizations which can tackle this or be a partner, or hopefully there is a new organization perhaps by migrant workers themselves or so on, we can support them. But perhaps regarding to students themselves who are working, can we come to some sort of dialogue? We would love to, but most of the time, from experience, these same employers definitely don't want to talk because they know they are doing illegal things. Either they are employing them illegally without work permit, or they are exploiting them in terms of payment or accommodation, etc. I know this happens in refugees also. I know this happens a lot. So they themselves don't want to talk because they know they are actually in the wrong. I think this would definitely need some sort of governmental intervention. We met the Ministry of Work before. We actually agreed to some things. Hopefully, perhaps we can sit with the Ministry of Work, and I don't know, some sort of way if we can bring them together to the table and come up with certain laws or regulations. Certainly, we would love that, but I think it will not be easy. It will not be easy.
Thank you, Ashraf. Thanks for the questions. If you guys have more questions, you can have the chance to ask them during the coffee break. We're gonna have a couple of 5 to 10 minutes coffee break, then we'll be back here for the fourth session. Thank you guys, thank you all. Thank you.